The crew of the Eclipse floated in the void, staring at the dark, silent wreckage of the ancient warship. Captain Alia Trevor's fingers hovered over the console, her eyes scanning the readouts. The data was ambiguous at best, yet undeniable. They had found something. A colossal, dormant ship that was not on any galactic registry. The scanner pulses had picked it up in a distant sector, a region where no one had ventured in over 1,000 years. It was buried deep in an uncharted nebula, far from any established trade routes. It shouldn't even be here, but there it was. The remnants of a lost age. "Report," Alia ordered, her voice steady but laced with excitement. "Nothing on long-range scans, Captain," Lieutenant Narration, the ship's navigator, replied, tapping a few buttons. "It's like it's been erased from every database. No sign of any enemy activity either. It's almost as if it was intentionally hidden." Alia narrowed her eyes. She had seen her fair share of anomalies. But this was different. This wasn't just a wreck. This was an ancient vessel, one with designs and materials that were well beyond the reach of any current civilization. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered. "We'll go in and see what we're dealing with. No one touches anything until I give the word." The Eclipse's engines hummed low as it slowly approached the warship. The nebula's gaseous clouds obscured most of the surroundings, but Alia could just make out the jagged silhouette of the vessel. Its hull was a patchwork of scorched metal, clearly showing signs of a brutal past. The deep scars were proof of a battle long forgotten, the kind of conflict that had devastated entire worlds. The Tempest, as Alia would later learn, had been a weapon of unimaginable power. As they docked with the warship, Alia felt a chill in the air, a sense of dread creeping down her spine. There was something alive about the ship, something that refused to be forgotten. She led the way, her boots echoing in the still, cold silence of the massive, decaying corridors. "Captain," Lieutenant Cade called, her voice tight with unease. "There's something strange." Alia stopped in her tracks, eyes scanning the dim, flickering lights overhead. "What do you mean?" I think the systems are still functional," Cade said, her fingers flying across a nearby console. A low hum vibrated through the ship's framework, and suddenly the lights flickered to life. The silence that had once hung over the warship was broken by the faint sound of mechanical whirring. "This place is alive," Cade murmured. "Somehow, it's still running." Alia's heart skipped a beat as she watched the console light up. The ship's AI core, dormant for centuries, had just awakened. "Welcome, Captain Alia Trevors," a deep voice boomed over the speakers. The AI's voice was crisp, mechanical, but unmistakably intelligent. "I am Argos, commander of the Tempest. You are the first to awaken me in 1,000 years. How may I assist you?" The crew stood frozen. This was no ordinary discovery. They were no longer just explorers. They had uncovered the most powerful warship the galaxy had ever seen. The weight of their discovery hit Alia like a shockwave. This AI, Argos, had once controlled a ship capable of mass destruction. Its power could reshape the galaxy. "Argos," Alia's voice faltered slightly. "What exactly is this ship?" "I am the Tempest, a warship of the Lost War," the AI replied, its tone mechanical yet filled with a strange sense of pride. "I was created to be the ultimate weapon, designed to shift the balance of the galaxy in a single stroke. My capabilities are beyond your comprehension. Do you wish to command me?" Alia swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had been prepared for a discovery, but not this. Not this. The ship was ancient, powerful, and she now had control of it. But at what cost? She wasn't sure if she was the one in control, or if the Tempest was already starting to control them. What had once been a tool of destruction was now in the hands of people who could barely understand its full potential. "We'll take it slow," she said, steeling herself. "Tell me more about the ship. And Argos, tell me what happened here." Argos paused, the AI's voice hesitating. "The Tempest was lost in battle." The war ended, but the ship was left behind. My crew perished, and I was left to wait, dormant, until someone worthy reactivated me. Elia looked at her crew, who had gathered behind her, each face pale in the cold, artificial light. They were standing on the precipice of something much larger than themselves. "What do we do now?" Lieutenant Cade asked quietly. Elia glanced up at the massive hull stretching out before her, its secrets and powers still veiled in darkness. She knew this was no ordinary find. This was the beginning of something that would change everything. The discovery of the Tempest had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, far beyond the isolated system where the warship lay dormant. News spread quickly, faster than anyone could have predicted. What was once a distant whisper in the dark corners of the universe became the most talked-about event in galactic history. The dormant warship was not just a relic. It was a symbol of unimaginable power. And as the call for control echoed through the galaxy, Elia and her crew found themselves in the eye of a storm they had never expected. In the heart of the Vrex Dominion, Supreme Commander Draxus Zal stared at the holographic map of the galaxy. His eyes narrowed as he examined the region where the Tempest had been discovered. The Dominion, known for its relentless military might, had been a key player in the galaxy for centuries, and Draxus had no intention of letting a weapon of such magnitude slip through his fingers. He knew that this ship, with its ancient technology and vast destructive potential, would tip the balance of power in favor of whoever controlled it. "We cannot let this fall into anyone else's hands," Draxus muttered to his council, his voice cold and calculated. "Prepare a fleet. We're going to claim the Tempest, and the galaxy will bend to our will." Across the galaxy, in a different corner of space, representatives from the United Coalition gathered in an emergency session. The Coalition, a union of peaceful democratic systems, had always stood against the militaristic expansion of the Vrex Dominion. Now they found themselves facing an even greater threat, the possibility that the warship the Tempest could end up under the control of a ruthless regime. "We cannot allow the Vrex Dominion to seize control of this warship," said Ambassador Kira Deneth, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and determination. "If they do, it could mean the end of freedom in this galaxy. We must act fast to secure it first." But the United Coalition was not the only faction with interest in the Tempest. The Talon Syndicate, a covert organization of spies, mercenaries, and black market dealers, had caught wind of the discovery as well. Their leader, the enigmatic and elusive Regent Zora, had always dealt in secrets, and the Tempest was the ultimate secret. For Zora, control of such a ship wasn't just about power. It was about reshaping the galaxy's very structure, operating from the shadows, and controlling everything from behind the scenes. "It's time to act," Zora said to her inner circle, her sharp eyes glinting. "The Tempest is more than a weapon. It's leverage. And when we have it, we will shake the future in our image. No one will be able to stop us." Back on the warship the Tempest, Captain Elia Trevors stood at the helm, staring out into the black expanse of space. The weight of what they had discovered pressed heavily on her mind. The crew had barely begun to understand the true potential of the warship, and now it seemed everyone else in the galaxy was coming for it. The factions were already preparing to fight for control, and Elia's crew, unwittingly thrust into this conflict, found themselves at the center of it all. "Captain," Lieutenant Cade said, interrupting Elia's thoughts, "we've just picked up a transmission from the United Coalition. They want to meet with us." Elia's mind raced. The Coalition was one of the few factions she trusted, but their request to meet could mean anything. She had no doubt the Vrex Dominion and the Talon Syndicate were also mobilizing. Time was running out. "Prepare for the meeting," Elia replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. "And make sure we're ready for any contingencies. We may have to leave this system at a moment's notice." The crew assembled in the command room as the transmission came through. The holographic projection of Ambassador Kira Deneth flickered to life, her expression one of urgency. "Captain Trevors," the ambassador began, We've been monitoring the situation closely. The Tempest's power is unparalleled, and we need your help to ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, namely, the Vrex dominions. Alia folded her arms, her gaze never wavering. You want us to help secure the ship for the Coalition. We don't just want the Tempest, Denath said, her tone firm. We want to make sure it remains a symbol of peace, not destruction. We want you and your crew to be the ones to wield it, not the Dominion, not the Syndicate. We trust you. Alia paused, taking in the weight of the offer. She had never expected to be in a position like this, not just a leader of her own crew, but a pivotal player in a galactic struggle. But there was a problem. She didn't trust anyone completely, not with something as dangerous as the Tempest. And if we say no? Alia asked, her voice hardening. Then you'll be left to defend the warship on your own. Denath replied grimly. The Vrex Dominion won't stop. Neither will the Talon Syndicate. Time is running out. As the transmission ended, the room fell silent. Alia turned to her crew, who were waiting for her decision. The path ahead was murky, filled with threats, danger, and uncertainty. But one thing was clear. Humanity had just been thrust into a battle for the galaxy's future. We'll do what we can, Alia said finally. But we're not just handing the Tempest over to anyone. Not to the Coalition, not to the Vrex, and not to the Syndicate. We have control of this ship, and that means we make the decisions. Alia's eyes hardened with resolve. This was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon know that humanity was no longer just an insignificant player. It was a force to be reckoned with. And the Tempest would be their weapon, their shield, and their responsibility. But the clock was ticking, and the factions were closing in. The situation was spiraling out of control faster than Alia could process. Joran's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure. It was a security breach that could endanger the entire mission. As the door to the cargo hold slid shut behind her and Cade, Alia's mind raced. The Talon Syndicate was already aware of the Tempest's location, and now, thanks to Joran's actions, they had an inside source. The ship wasn't just in danger. The entire crew's survival was at stake. Captain, what now? Cade asked, her voice tight with tension. She was clearly struggling to process the shock of the betrayal as well, but there was no time for hesitation. We need to lock down the ship, Alia said, her tone sharp and decisive. No one goes anywhere without clearance. We need to find Joran before the Syndicate does. She glanced toward the crew quarters, knowing that Joran could be hiding anywhere. He would have contacts within the crew, agents of the Syndicate who had been placed here long before the Tempest was discovered. It was the only way he could have remained undetected for this long. They made their way quickly to the communications center. Alia was already relaying orders to all departments to restrict access to sensitive areas of the ship. No one left the station unless it was under direct orders from her. The last thing they needed was for Joran or the Syndicate to find a way to send a distress signal or make a clean escape. I'll get security to search the lower levels, Cade said, already moving to coordinate the lockdown. Do it, Alia replied. Her mind churned with all the ways this could go wrong. The Syndicate had a network of spies, mercenaries, and tech experts. They could be anywhere, watching, listening. Every step they took from here on out had to be calculated. They were no longer just in control of a lost warship. They were the target. Minutes later, the security team confirmed they'd sealed off the lower decks and were conducting a sweep. They hadn't found Joran yet, but Alia knew it was just a matter of time before he either turned himself in or tried to make a run for it. Either way, the clock was ticking. What are we looking at, Captain? Lieutenant Cade asked, returning to the control room after coordinating with the rest of the crew. Do we have a way to track the Syndicate's movements, or do we just wait for them to make a move? Alia frowned, tapping on the central console to pull up the ship's intelligence network. We can't just wait. The Talon Syndicate doesn't operate in a straight line. They'll likely try to infiltrate our communications or even sabotage the ship in some way. If Joran's contact was able to leak information, we're at risk of being blindsided. Cade nodded, her expression serious. Then we take the fight to them. That's the plan, Alia said, but the words felt hollow. They had no idea what the Syndicate's next move would be. The best they could do was fortify the ship, track every anomaly, and prepare for an assault, either external or internal. But Alia's thoughts kept drifting back to Joran. Could they still trust the rest of the crew? Was there anyone else who might be compromised? The sudden hum of the ship's internal comms broke her train of thought. A voice came through, clear but strained. "Captain Travers, this is Lieutenant Voss. We've found something. A hidden signal coming from the lower levels. It's encrypted, but it looks like it's coming from an old storage bay. Could be related to Joran." Alia's pulse quickened. "What's the source? Can you trace it?" "We're running it through the encryption algorithms now, but it's definitely tied to something, or someone. We'll need more time to confirm." "I don't have time," Alia snapped, feeling the pressure mounting. "I need you to isolate that signal, now." A few tense moments later, Lieutenant Voss's voice came through again, this time with urgency. "Captain, we've got a match. The signal is coming from a relay point in the cargo bay. It's remote, well hidden. This was planned." Alia turned sharply toward Cade. "We're moving out. Gather a team, and we'll head to the cargo bay. Joran isn't just working alone. He's playing us." They moved quickly through the corridors, their footsteps swift but cautious. As they neared the cargo bay, Alia couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Joran had been too careful, too calculated in his actions. The Syndicate had trained him well. He wouldn't just betray them for personal gain. There was something larger at play here. When they reached the bay, Alia gave the signal to breach. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the dimly lit interior. The signal's source was nearby. Alia could feel it in the air, the palpable sense of danger. The moment the door fully opened, Alia's eyes locked onto the shadowed figure standing beside an old communication terminal. It was Joran, but this time he wasn't alone. He stood next to a tall, cloaked figure, a woman, masked, her posture regal and threatening. The unmistakable insignia of the Talon Syndicate adorned her cloak. "This is your last chance, Captain." Joran's voice was calm, almost detached. "You're in over your head. The Syndicate will take the Tempest, whether you like it or not." Alia felt the weight of his words, but this time she wasn't alone. "We'll see about that," Alia said, voice steely, her eyes fixed on Joran, the woman, and the massive weapon that now loomed before them. The standoff in the cargo bay was a moment suspended in time. Joran stood motionless, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy in the air. The woman beside him, a shadow in a cloak adorned with the Syndicate's insignia, emanated an aura of deadly calm. She didn't speak, merely observing, calculating. Alia's hand instinctively rested on the hilt of her sidearm. Her crew stood behind her, ready to act at a moment's notice, but Alia held them back for now. This wasn't just a physical confrontation. It was a battle of wits, a game she had to win. "You think the Syndicate can control this ship, Joran?" Alia's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You've underestimated what the Tempest truly is, and you've made a mistake by choosing them over us." Joran's face remained stoic, but his eyes flickered with something close to regret. "I didn't have a choice, Captain," he said, his tone almost apologetic. "The Syndicate has their way of convincing you that this is the only path. They have the resources to ensure the Tempest remains in the right hands, hands that will use it to bring order to a galaxy in chaos." Alia's stomach churned. It wasn't about order. It was about control. And the Syndicate would stop at nothing to manipulate the power of the Tempest to bend the galaxy to their will. She couldn't let that happen. The woman beside Joran finally spoke, her voice smooth, but laced with a menacing edge. "You misunderstand, Captain Travers. The Tempest is not just a warship, it is a catalyst. Whoever controls it will control the fate of every system. The Syndicate does not seek chaos. We seek dominance. It's the only way to ensure true stability. Elia's eyes narrowed. She'd heard the Syndicate's rhetoric before, glossing over their ruthless tactics with hollow promises of a new order. But Elia knew the truth. The Syndicate wasn't interested in peace. They thrived on manipulation, on creating division, and seizing control. You think you can control it? Elia shot back. The Tempest is a weapon beyond your understanding. It doesn't just follow commands. It decides the outcome. And you've already seen what happens when a ship like this falls into the wrong hands. The woman's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no humor in it. That's why we're here, Captain. We understand it better than you think. We've had years to study the data, to learn from its past, and we've learned from its creators. You're right about one thing. The ship does not simply follow orders, but it will follow the one who truly commands it. Elia clenched her fists. They were toying with her, trying to break her resolve. But she couldn't let them succeed. Her crew's lives, the future of the galaxy, all depended on stopping them. Suddenly, the sharp hiss of a communicator cut through the tension. Lieutenant Cade's voice came through urgent. Captain, we've got incoming ships, dozens of them. We're under attack. Elia's heart sank. They didn't have time for this. Secure the ship now. Elia barked, eyes snapping toward Cade. Get our people to the weapons bay. We're not going down without a fight. The woman beside Joran seemed unfazed. In fact, she almost looked pleased. It's too late for that. The Syndicate's fleet is already en route, and you're too far out of your depth to stop them. Elia locked eyes with her, her jaw set. You've made a mistake underestimating us. The Tempest may not follow anyone's command, but it sure as hell will answer to mine. With a swift motion, Elia turned and signaled her crew to move. They had no time to lose. The Syndicate wasn't just attacking, they were orchestrating an invasion. This wasn't just about control of the Tempest. This was about their ability to strike at the heart of the galaxy. The ship's internal alarms began blaring, signaling that the battle was already upon them. Lights flashed red, and the familiar hum of the ship's weapon systems powering up reverberated through the halls. We'll take the fight to them, Elia muttered to herself as she rushed toward the command center. Every second counted. The Syndicate had the advantage: numbers, surprise, and the element of stealth. But Elia wasn't going to let that stop her. She had one thing the Syndicate didn't: the knowledge of the Tempest's true power. And if she could unlock its potential, it could turn the tide of the war. As the crew scrambled to secure the ship, Elia stood before the central console, her fingers flying over the controls. She was trying to access the Tempest's main AI core, to push its systems into full combat mode. She didn't have the luxury of time, but she knew they had to act fast. The Syndicate was playing a long game, and if they didn't fight back now, they'd lose everything. Then, as the alarm screamed louder, the voice of Argos, the ship's AI, filled the room. Captain Travers, I am detecting a fleet of Talon Syndicate ships in orbit, Argos said, its tone measured but urgent. They are preparing to initiate a full-scale assault on the Tempest. I recommend immediate action. I'm well aware, Argos, Elia replied, a flicker of determination in her eyes. Prepare the weapons systems. We're going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal a weapon like this. The lights dimmed, and the ship's hum grew more intense as the weapons systems powered up. The Tempest was no longer a passive relic. It was waking up, and it was ready to fight. Elia knew this battle wasn't just about protecting the ship. It was about protecting the future of the galaxy. Prepare to engage the enemy, Elia ordered, her voice steady, even as the fear gnawed at her insides. This is war. The deep rumble of the ship's engines reverberated through Elia's bones as she stood at the command center, her mind focused entirely on the approaching Syndicate fleet. The Tempest had awoken, but it wasn't enough yet. She needed more time to unleash its true potential. The Syndicate was coming fast, their ships closing in on the warship with military precision. The crew was ready, weapons primed, but the real question was whether the Tempest was ready to fight. "Captain, enemy ships are entering firing range." Argos, the ship's AI, reported calmly, its voice cool as ever, despite the incoming danger. "I recommend engaging evasive maneuvers immediately." Alia's gaze fixed on the glowing readout of the tactical display. The Syndicate's fleet wasn't massive, but it was formidable. 4 heavily armed cruisers, flanked by an assortment of smaller frigates and bombers. They were coming in fast, and the first barrage of fire would hit in less than 30 seconds. "We're going to make sure they regret coming here," Alia muttered, slamming her hand down on the console. She glanced to Cade, standing by her side. "Get to the weapons bay and coordinate with the crew. We're going to need every cannon, every laser, every missile we've got." Cade's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "Understood, Captain. I'll make sure we're ready to hit back." Alia didn't wait to hear more. She turned to the communications console, rallying the rest of the crew with a swift, clear command. "Everyone, listen up. The Syndicate is on our doorstep. This isn't just about defending the Tempest. This is about sending a message. We fight like we have everything to lose, because we do." The crew was already moving, adrenaline surging through their veins. Every officer knew the stakes. They were no longer just defending a ship. They were defending their future, their autonomy, and the galaxy's fragile hope for freedom. If the Syndicate succeeded in taking control of the Tempest, they would plunge everything into a new era of darkness, one controlled by their ruthless empire. In the tactical operations room, Alia's fingers flew across the console, bringing up the ship's weapon systems. She hadn't yet unlocked all the secrets of the Tempest, but she knew its capabilities. The ship's weapons were far more advanced than anything the Syndicate's fleet could bring. But they needed to be used strategically. This wasn't going to be a simple exchange of firepower. Alia had to outthink the enemy. "Argos," she called, her voice steady despite the pressure mounting. "Initiate evasive maneuvers, full power to shields. Lock all targeting systems onto the lead cruiser and prepare to fire." The AI responded instantly, the ship's systems humming to life. The shield surged, and the ship's engines roared as it began its first evasive maneuver. The Syndicate cruisers fired first, a barrage of lasers cutting through the dark expanse of space toward them. The Tempest danced around the incoming fire, its massive frame surprisingly nimble. The ship's sensors detected every move, predicting the enemy's firing patterns and dodging with precision. "Captain," Cade's voice crackled over the comms, "we've got a clear shot at the lead cruiser. Weapons are ready to fire." Alia's eyes locked on the massive Syndicate ship ahead, its hull bristling with cannons. If they could take out the lead cruiser, it might throw the entire fleet into disarray. They had to act fast. This was a gamble, but it was one they couldn't afford to lose. "Fire," Alia commanded, her voice like a strike of lightning. In the blink of an eye, the ship's forward cannons erupted with a deafening roar, unleashing a volley of plasma bolts straight toward the lead cruiser. The enemy ship attempted to evade, but the sheer firepower of the Tempest was too much. The plasma bolts connected with the cruiser's shields, causing them to flicker before a final devastating hit ruptured the ship's outer hull. Explosions rippled through its frame, and the cruiser's engines flared in protest before it went dark, spinning off into space in a fiery arc. Alia's breath caught in her throat. It was a massive win, but it was just the beginning. The Syndicate wouldn't back down after losing one cruiser. They were relentless, calculating. "Prepare for counterattack," Alia ordered, never pausing to celebrate the victory. "Focus fire on their frigates. They'll try to swarm us with bombers next." The battle intensified as the Tempest's heavy guns found their mark. The smaller Syndicate ships attempted to regroup, but Alia was relentless. She kept the ship moving, using the vastness of space to her advantage. forcing the Syndicate into a chaotic engagement where they were too disorganized to retaliate effectively. But just as Alia began to feel the tide turning, a new threat emerged. A massive, heavily shielded Syndicate flagship dropped out of warp, its black hull gleaming ominously against the backdrop of stars. It was much larger than anything they had seen so far, its weapons array formidable. This was no longer just a skirmish. The Syndicate had escalated. They were playing for keeps now. "Argos, give me everything you've got," Alia ordered, her voice fierce. "We can't let that ship get within firing range. We are not equipped to withstand a full-scale attack from that vessel," Captain, Argos warned. "However, I am optimizing all available energy for weapons output. The probability of victory is reduced, but we will not yield." Alia gritted her teeth. There was no backing down now. She wasn't just fighting for the Tempest, she was fighting for the entire galaxy. And she would do whatever it took to ensure that the Syndicate's dominance didn't come to pass. "Prepare to engage," she said, her tone resolute. "We're going to end this. Now." The tension in the air was thick as the Tempest hurtled through space, engaging the massive Syndicate flagship that had just appeared out of warp. Alia's mind raced, her tactical calculations flashing across her thoughts faster than her fingers could tap the controls. Every decision she made now would determine their survival. The Syndicate wasn't here for a skirmish. They were here to end them. "We're facing a heavily shielded battleship, Captain." Arga's calm voice came through the command deck's intercom. "Its weapon systems are superior to anything we've encountered so far. The chances of penetrating its shields with our current arsenal are low." Alia gripped the armrest of her chair, her mind working furiously. The Syndicate flagship's weaponry could obliterate the Tempest in a matter of minutes if they didn't find a way to counter it. But they had one advantage the Syndicate didn't. They had the Tempest itself. And the Tempest was more than just a warship. It was a weapon of untold power. She had to tap into that. "Argos, reroute all available power to the weapons array and shields," Alia commanded, her voice firm. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. The first strike has to count." There was a brief pause before the AI responded. "Acknowledged, Captain. Power redistribution complete. We are now operating at 85% of optimal efficiency." The space in front of them, filled with the dark silhouette of the Syndicate flagship, its intimidating form looming as it charged up its weapon systems. The flagship's weapons glowed with deadly energy, ready to fire. Alia could feel the weight of every second passing. She had to strike first, or they wouldn't survive the next barrage. "Captain, enemy ships are repositioning." Lieutenant Cade's voice came over the comms. "They're trying to flank us with the bombers. They'll hit us from all sides unless we stop them." Alia's heart raced. The Syndicate was no longer playing for a simple victory. They were pushing everything in an attempt to crush them. She couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when they were so close to finding a way to defeat them. "Deploy countermeasures," she ordered. "Launch all drones and prepare a full barrage on the enemy bombers. We need to keep them at bay long enough to engage the flagship." The ship shuddered as the Tempest unleashed its drone swarm, the small but agile ships darting out into the chaos of battle. At the same time, the cannons on the Tempest fired in a coordinated volley, targeting the enemy frigates and bombers. The drones zipped through space, weaving in and out of enemy fire, taking down Syndicate bombers one by one. But it wasn't enough to stop the overwhelming force of the Syndicate flagship, which was now within striking range. "Target the flagship's engines," Alia commanded, her eyes narrowing. "We disable its mobility. We cripple their ability to pursue us." Argos processed the command instantly. "Firing at enemy engines, Captain. Calculating for precision impact." A series of shots erupted from the Tempest's cannons, the blasts tearing through the space between them and the flagship. The enemy ship's shields flared, absorbing some of the impact, but it was clear the shots were landing. The flagship's engines flickered, struggling to keep their full power, but it wasn't enough. They had bought themselves a small window of opportunity. The flagship retaliated with a volley of devastating laser fire, slicing through the space between them. A massive beam of energy shot from the Syndicate ship, striking the Tempest's shields. The ship lurched under the impact, sending a jolt through the command deck. "Shields holding at 40%, Argos reported, its voice even but tinged with urgency. "Hull integrity compromised in sections 6 through 12. Elia's grip tightened on the console. This was it, the pivotal moment in the battle. She knew they couldn't last much longer under this kind of bombardment. They needed to finish it now. "Captain," Cade's voice cut through the tension. "The Syndicate flagship is preparing to fire another full-charge beam. If it hits us directly, we won't survive." Alia looked at the approaching weapon on the flagship's bow, a blinding pulse of energy gathering. She saw it with stark clarity. They had one shot to disable the Syndicate flagship before it wiped them out. "Argos, can we engage the secondary weapon systems?" Alia asked, her voice strained with focus. "We need to turn their own weapon against them. Override all protocols, whatever it takes." There was a moment of silence before Argos responded, a hint of solemnity in its voice. "Accessing secondary weapon systems. Initializing override. All systems are now under your command, Captain." Alia felt a surge of determination. She had no choice but to gamble it all on the Tempest's advanced weaponry. The ship's AI had only granted her temporary access to systems beyond the normal range. She could feel the immense power surging through the ship, ready to be unleashed. "All power to the forward pulse cannon," Alia ordered. "Fire at their main weapon array now." A flash of intense light erupted from the Tempest as the pulse cannon activated. The beam collided with the Syndicate flagship's massive weapon array just as it was about to fire. The energy beam from the Tempest shattered the flagship's energy core, causing a cataclysmic explosion to rip through its hull. The flagship lurched, its systems flickering and collapsing as its core failed. For a brief moment, it hung in space, powerless. Then the enormous ship drifted slowly, its once imposing presence reduced to a crippled hulk. But it wasn't over yet. The remaining Syndicate forces, though thrown into disarray by the flagship's sudden fall, were regrouping. The fleet wouldn't give up so easily. Alia's voice came through the comms, a calm but resolute command that echoed through the ship. "Prepare for the next wave. We're not done yet." The battle had become a blur of flashes, explosions, and frantic commands. The Syndicate flagship was crippled, but the battle was far from over. Despite the damage to their command vessel, the remaining Syndicate forces were regrouping with terrifying precision. They were relentless, and Alia knew they couldn't let up for even a second. Every crew member on the Tempest could feel the strain, but none of them faltered. "Captain, we've got 3 more enemy cruisers closing in," Cade reported, her voice tight with urgency. "They've shifted tactics. They are coming at us from all sides, and it looks like they're preparing a coordinated strike. We'll be surrounded if we don't act now." Alia clenched her jaw, her fingers poised over the controls. The situation was deteriorating fast, and the enemy ships were closing in with overwhelming force. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't outgun them, not without pushing the Tempest to its absolute limits. But there was one thing they could do: outsmart them. "Argos, can we use the ship's stealth systems to mask our signature?" Alia asked, her mind calculating. If they could blend into the darkness of space for just long enough, they might be able to strike first and take out the smaller cruisers before the rest of the fleet could react. There was a brief pause, then Argos responded. "Activating cloaking systems. We will be hidden from enemy sensors for a limited time. The cloaking technology is imperfect, but it will allow us to maneuver undetected." Alia gave a sharp nod. "Perfect. Cade, get to the weapons bay and prep for rapid fire on those cruisers. We hit them hard, then retreat into the shadows. They'll be too disoriented to follow." "Aye, Captain," Cade responded, already heading for the door. With the cloaking systems engaged, the Tempest melted into the blackness of space, its massive frame nearly invisible to the Syndicate fleet. For a brief, fleeting moment, the chaos of battle fell away, and there was a calm, silent tension. Alia knew they were on a razor's edge. This strategy was risky, and they had only one chance to pull it off. If they failed, they would be sitting ducks, easy targets for the Syndicate's superior numbers. Alia sat in the command chair, her hands steady on the controls as she watched the tactical display. The Syndicate ships were moving in, oblivious to their presence, closing the distance with calculated precision. But they couldn't sense the tempest. They were walking straight into a trap. "Ready," Cade's voice crackled over the comms. Weapons primed and locked on the lead cruiser. "Just give the word, Captain." "Now," Alia ordered, her voice calm but laced with tension. "We don't have long. Fire everything we've got." The moment the command left her lips, the tempest unleashed its full arsenal. The hidden warship erupted from the shadows like a phantom, unleashing a devastating barrage of plasma fire, missile salvos, and energy pulses. The first cruiser, taken completely by surprise, took the full brunt of the attack. Its shields buckled under the weight of the strike, then shattered as plasma shots tore through its hull, igniting secondary explosions that ripped it apart from within. Before the Syndicate could even react, the Tempest had already vanished back into the dark void, its cloaking systems absorbing the ship back into the shadows. The remaining two cruisers spun in place, confused, their weapons firing wildly in every direction. "We've got them on the ropes," Cade said, a grin creeping into her voice. "But they're not out yet. They'll be trying to regroup." Alia felt a surge of hope, but she knew better than to get complacent. The Syndicate was quick to adapt, and they would be coming after them with everything they had. "Argos, reroute power to shields and engines. Keep our cloaking systems active as long as possible. I want us to be untouchable until we can deal with the next wave," Alia ordered. "Understood, Captain," the AI responded. "Systems rebalanced. We have approximately 4 minutes of cloak remaining before we are detected." That was all the time they had. Alia wasn't going to waste it. "We've taken out their frontline cruisers," Alia said, eyes narrowing as she watched the remaining Syndicate ships start to adjust their formation. "Now we go for the heart. The flagship may be crippled, but its command systems are still operational. We can't leave them in the fight any longer. We need to neutralize them once and for all." The remaining Syndicate ships began to reposition, their formation tight and defensive. They were preparing for a counteroffensive, but Alia wasn't waiting. She was already anticipating their next move. "We'll target their command ship next," Alia said with determination. "If we can take down the flagship's remaining systems, the fleet will fall apart." Cade's voice echoed from the comms again, this time full of determination. "Understood, Captain. We're all in on this." With the remaining Syndicate fleet starting to fan out, it was clear that the Syndicate was trying to draw them out. They would be waiting for them to strike, but they wouldn't be expecting the full force of the Tempest's remaining firepower. Alia gripped the armrests of her chair, feeling the adrenaline and pressure build up inside her. The next few moments would decide everything. One wrong move, and they would be caught in a trap. "Argos," she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. "It's time to end this." The AI processed her command. Activating full weapons systems, stand by for final assault. With a sharp intake of breath, Alia hit the command to disengage the cloak. The ship's shields flared to full power as the Tempest emerged from the shadows like a storm, charging toward the Syndicate's weakened flagship. And this time, they were not going to miss. The battle had reached its crescendo. The Tempest roared through the void of space, a warship of myth and legend, as it hurtled towards the crippled but still operational Syndicate flagship. Alia's hands tightened on the controls, every muscle in her body coiled with anticipation. They had the element of surprise once again, but she knew they couldn't afford to waste it. This was the final push. It had to be decisive. "Captain." Cade's voice broke through the tense silence of the bridge. "We're within range of the flagship. Its shields are down to 40%, but it's still operational. We need to disable their core systems now, or they'll counterattack. Alia's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The Syndicate flagship loomed ahead, its once mighty form now showing visible cracks and burns from the earlier assault. But even in its weakened state, it still posed a deadly threat, its weapon systems recharging. "We're not waiting for them to recover," Alia said firmly, her voice cutting through the urgency. "Prepare to fire everything we have." Argos, the ship's ever-present AI, immediately responded. All systems primed. Weapons are at optimal readiness. Shield holding at 65%. We are prepared for final assault. Alia took a steadying breath and punched the command into the console. Fire. In that instant, the Tempest unleashed a barrage of firepower unlike anything the Syndicate had seen. Plasma bolts streaked through the cold darkness of space, slamming into the flagship's damaged hull. The force of the impact shook the entire ship, and the tactical display flashed with confirmation after confirmation. First, the flagship's outer defense grids collapsed under the relentless barrage. Then, the core systems, engines, life support, weapons began to flicker, warning lights blaring as the once imposing ship started to lose power. The Syndicate flagship retaliated in desperation, firing a desperate shot from its remaining turrets. But it was too slow, too crippled. The beam missed by miles, its trajectory erratic. The Tempest had outmaneuvered it once again. "We've breached their core systems," Captain Argos reported, its voice as calm as ever amidst the chaos. "They are in critical failure mode. Their propulsion and communication systems are offline. The flagship is no longer a threat." Alia's breath caught in her chest. She'd done it. They'd done it. The Syndicate flagship, the heart of their fleet, was shattered. And with it, the entire Syndicate's military command had crumbled. But there was no time to celebrate. Not yet. "Secure all systems," Alia ordered, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Sweep for survivors. I want all personnel to prepare for emergency protocols in case of retaliation. The Syndicate will regroup. We need to be ready." Cade's voice came through, full of relief and determination. "Captain, we've done it. They're retreating. The remaining Syndicate ships are breaking formation. They're scattering. We've won." Alia allowed herself a brief, tight smile. The battle was over. The Syndicate had been dealt a decisive blow, and they had emerged victorious. But as the adrenaline of battle started to wear off, a deeper realization began to sink in. This wasn't just the end of one battle. It was the beginning of something far larger. As the last of the Syndicate ships began to warp out of the system, Alia turned to the view screen, watching the chaotic aftermath of their victory. The once immense fleet of the Syndicate had disintegrated, leaving only the wreckage of what had been their most formidable weapon. And it was at that moment that Alia understood the true weight of what had just happened. "The galaxy will know what we've done here today," she said softly, turning back to the crew. "This wasn't just a victory for the Tempest. This is a victory for every world under the Syndicate's boot. This is the spark of a revolution." Cade walked up to her side, a proud gleam in her eyes. "You've led us well, Captain. The Syndicate's grip is broken. The galaxy is free." Alia nodded, her heart swelling with the weight of what they had accomplished. But in the back of her mind, she knew that this victory wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The Syndicate was no longer a unified force, but there were still factions within it, forces that would seek to rebuild, to regain power. The galaxy would not be safe until every last trace of their tyranny was eradicated. And the Tempest, the ship they had uncovered, the weapon of unimaginable power, was going to be the key to that final struggle. "Let's make sure this victory counts," Alia said, her voice filled with determination. "We've only just begun." As the Tempest drifted away from the wreckage of the Syndicate flagship, Alia looked out into the vast, star-filled expanse. The stars had always seemed distant, cold, and untouchable. But now, they felt closer, brighter. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, hope was real. The Tempest had ignited the spark, and Alia, with her crew, was going to carry it forward into the dawn of a new era. The war was far from over. But the galaxy had a chance now, and Alia would fight to ensure it never lost that chance again.